unique situation. My name is Guy Edwab. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Explore Analytics, if I haven't already had the chance to engage with you. And today we're going to take a look at 5 top requested ServiceNow reports that use Explore Analytics. I'll be happy to talk a little bit about why we're using Explore Analytics to get this, what are the sorts of features that are being pulled into play, and I'll show you a little bit of how they're put together and some of that ease of use. Again, thank you all for joining. So what we often see is that there's a lot of hunger to go beyond some of the canned reporting that's within ServiceNow. You know, it has the ability to do pie charts of incidents by group or changes by, type. But when you want to get to something that combines more sets of data together or has some calculations beyond it, there can be some limitations. So what we've heard is what we're going to share today, some of those use cases that we see most often. And I'll touch at sort of what the underlying theme and underlying commonality between them is. And when we talk about these reports in Explore Analytics, one thing I want to underline is that our goal is not just to be able to generate these reports, because I'm sure everyone on this call has come up with some way of turning around the kinds of reports that are being asked for. But we want to do this in a sustainable way, something that doesn't require a lot of manual work, administrative changes, code, duplication of data. ServiceNow is really great because you can write JavaScript to your heart's content and add custom tables. You can, use administrative tools to create additional tables. But what we want to do is make this really point and click and something that a business analyst who's been let loose on the data can really take advantage of for themselves. The tool we're using to deliver these is Explore Analytics. Explore Analytics is a complete end-to-end reporting solution for ServiceNow. It allows both real-time, ad hoc point-and-click reports, as well as operational dashboards and the more traditional KPIs where you're snapshotting data over time. We also, with our IT service management analytical application, have a large pre-built library of reports. And one of the advantages that we'll touch on today is that we do this both for ServiceNow, but we can also reach to other sources of data. And this is really key because we want to be able to look at these both from the side of KPIs where you're snapshotting things over time. So like this aging report, what's the average age week over week or month over month? But we also want real-time reports that drive the process. So for my team, how many are over a day old? How many are 1 to 10 days old? So you can really take action on it that way. And with Explore Analytics, our goal is to be able to satisfy both the KPIs for the long-term measurement and the live reports that drive the analysis. So without further ado, let's take a look at the use cases. So the first use case that we're going to take a look at is backlogs. I put this up front because this is the number one. I hear it all the time, and particularly articulated in this incidents open, resolved, and backlog report. Now, if you're using our Explore Analytics IT service management analytical application, then you've had this pre-built. But if you're new to the solution, you can take a look at this here. Why is a report with backlogs key? The reason that backlogs are important, right? Backlogs are, the difference between what's opened and what's resolved cumulatively over time. So if we opened 10 incidents yesterday and closed 5, today we have 10 in our, 5 in our leftover in our backlog. Got to do math on the fly there. And then if today we open another 5 and close another 3, now we're going to have 7 in that backlog. So it allows you to look past the daily work that's being done at the underlying trend. Are we getting ahead of things or are we falling behind? And the other reason that this is going to be key is that we want to be able to get this information on a regular basis and be able to pair this with pointing people at the backlog in real time. So I'll show this example. It involves no ServiceNow administrative changes to the tables. There's 2 approaches that I can show. One is using what we call a track trend, that snapshot, or you can generate this real time using running total calculations. It's not the ideal way of doing it, but we support that as well. It also involves mashing up multiple data sets, and the report as a whole is going to be live. So let me switch over to take a look at Explore Analytics. And what we're showing here is my backlog, open, closed, and resolved backlog report. I hope your IT organization is ahead of the curve as opposed to mine, where the backlog is growing and growing, probably because it's just me in a sandbox instance. To show a little bit about the capabilities here, one of the key things is that this is going to be a fully interactive report where I can very easily slice through the data. I could drill down to see day to day rather than week to week as we're seeing here. It's very easy for me to also reformat this if I wanted to see it all as lines or all as bars or combos. That's something that the person who's viewing the report can do for themselves. But the advanced capability that we're leveraging here, this is using something called a running total. So rather than having that snapshot report, this version uses this very Excel-like formula where I'm taking the opened minus the resolved, and then I'm accumulating it using a running total. So it's going to do that calculation and then add the remainder to the next week. Now, this only works assuming that at the very beginning of the data set, there's nothing in the backlog, right? If you're starting from 0, then you can use this running total and it'll let you know what's going on. So if there are things from before the span of your data, you'll have to exclude that out. Now, that's the running total approach. The other version, the more traditional version, is to show this from a trend job. Now, the way that the trend job would work is that I would, if I go to my trends, is I need to set up a report on a regular basis that's going to capture the data I'm looking for. Now, with Explore Analytics, we do this in a very intuitive way. So here I create a real-time pivot that's showing me active is true, grouped by, if I want to break this down by assignment group and priority, and this is the backlog, right? This is the number of currently active incidents. In order to automate this to be run on a regular basis, all I have to do is add a trend job, where basically I would say on a weekly schedule, let's say every Monday, I'd repeat this. So on Monday, it would run that live report and save that to a table. Again, it's all using drag and drop tools that any business analyst could very easily capture. And it's going to, again, get me back to this space where I'm able to see all 3 of these sets of data together. That's just a quick introduction to this report, but I hope you can sort of see the potential there. Again, you can apply this to any task-based process. This example was with incidents, but you could also see the HR case backlog. You could see change backlogs. Whatever that task is, and you want to see how that accumulates over time, you can do that right there. Let's take a look at a second case. This one, it comes up a little less frequency, but I often see the underlying case being articulated, which is, in this case, we're talking about incident resolution SLAs. And you say, well, we have a lot of outliers. We have a lot of noise, right? Most of our incidents get taken care of within an hour, but then we have some critical incidents that, they could last, 2 weeks because they're, tied to, complex changes. So when you look at that average, the mean resolution time, it's going to be all over the place. It's going to be heavily impacted by those outliers. Anyone who took basic statistics will know that averages can very often be moved around by some of those outliers. Instead, what often you see in this space is being able to use median, 50th percentile, 90th percentile, and 99th percentile reporting, right? You want to be able to break it down so that you can see the median, which is, what are the people in the middle of the road seeing most of the time, and then also capture that outliers and see, okay, a lot of people are getting their incidents resolved, let's say within 12 hours, but there's a few people where it actually takes 21 days. So on the one hand, you can get a sense of what's the typical person seeing, and then on the other hand, you can see, okay, what are the few big outliers that are really impacting our numbers? This takes some advanced calculation. ServiceNow doesn't have within its APIs the ability to do that. So the way we actually do that in Explore Analytics is we can pull the individual rows and use a composite to get that. So if I take a quick look at what that looks like in Explore Analytics, right? This is my median 90th and 99th percentile report. And one of the things that you'll see is that we're using some additional formatting and presentation tools that are available for any kind of a timeline to present this. It takes a little bit additional time to load because we're actually pulling the individual rows. Again, it's still a real-time report, and then doing that additional calculation. You can see here we're actually doing some forecasting. So we're using some advanced forecasting tools. All it requires is for you to click and configure how you want that seasonal forecast to go. But that allows me to project what it's going to look like. You can see that even though there's a lot of back and forth, we're trending in a downward direction using that forecast. Setting up these resolution times is easy. You can see I'm just saying that for this data, instead of doing an average or a sum, I'm just selecting that I want to do the percentile and selecting the 90th percentile. So it's very easy. It allows you to see, for example, in May, half of our SLAs were resolved within 9 days, but there were a couple hours that took, almost a full year. I would assume that that was some, software backlog related ticket, or the fact that this is my sandbox and it's just me doing tickets in there. So again, this is something that you can really apply, whether it's timeline or some other bar chart data. Anytime you have a lot of data and there's a lot of outliers that really cloud up the noise, and your averages wind up not being so accurate. The next use case, now there's a lot of different ways that you could actually present this, a lot of different reports. But again, I hear the underlying problem behind this all the time, and that's breaking down multi-step workflows into specific segments of time. So in this case, this example is looking at what's the time to deliver a requested item in the service catalog. Now that might have a full end-to-end, let's say 10-day delivery time. But within that, some of that time is the time you're waiting for the approval, and then some of it is the actual fulfillment. Again, if you're just reporting straight, beginning to end, it doesn't give you that full sense of what's the hang up, where are we seeing some particular challenges. So here, this is where you can really do some more fine-grained time analysis. And with some of these formatting tools that I'm showing, you can attract attention to patterns without sacrificing detail. I know that we like to show bar charts and timelines and all these really great rich visualizations. In reality, you wind up putting a lot of detailed data in pivots, and you want to make sure that things don't just get lost in a wall of numbers, that you're really attracting people's attention to the parts that are important. So if I take a look at the live example in Explore Analytics, again, this is pulling data directly from ServiceNow. It's still fully interactive, where I could take a look at sorting by a particular time set or something like that. I think I particularly want to look at, I have it limited just to the top 10 rows. I could actually show all of the data here, right? So it's very easy for you to very quickly move through the data however you want to analyze it. And again, these coloring rules are attracting your attention to the results. I just put them into these bins and attached a color to it. And it's as simple as that. Again, it's real time. It's drillable if I want to see, the individual requested items that's behind that and open up the requested item. Again, that's part of why we want it to be real time as well, so that you can not only see that high level, but take action directly against the requested item itself. Again, this is something that you can apply to any process with multiple checkpoints. It is going to depend on whether that's different date time fields or whether there's different records, how you put that together. But things like how long was it with level 1 support, or how long was it waiting for an approval in a change management process? Really, you can think about this for a lot of use cases. Geez, get back to the correct slide. Great. So we've seen the first 3 cases, 2 more cases to go. This one is a very common one. It's aging. You want to focus your team on immediate action. You want to actively improve metrics, right? So for example, with an incident aging report, it's very nice to know that the average ticket is, 4 hours old, but really what you want to do is put in front of the people who are taking action on it, uh, the ability to drill down and take action, drive it to a better close. Here, it's just drag and drop. It's aging and binning. You can do it in a multi-level pivot, and you can really use it against any deadline, time left until. So for example, this is in asset management, how long until the warranties expire. These are the 25 that are within 30 days of expiring. If I'm responsible for this, I'm going to click into that and I'm going to drive that. Rather than showing this as yet another live example, what I want to do is just briefly talk about the power of those real-time reports. So we had a large corporation that was using this, and their key use case was around stale incidents that hadn't been actioned on within X amount of time. When they had reports that talked about how many stale incidents they'd had, but what they did was they deployed this real-time report. And they saw a 30% improvement in stale incidents within the first 6 months, because they weren't just measuring it, they were driving the attention of the folks on their team. And now this was a large organization with thousands of users worldwide. The amount of time it took them to deploy in their instance, from end to end, from signing up for Explore Analytics to having the aging reports that they wanted, was about an hour. So you can see that if there's that quick to deploy and that big of an improvement, think about what are the 5 reports that in your organization would have that big of an impact, and how long would it take you to be able to deploy that? My guess is you could make a pretty big dent in your world pretty quickly. And then the last case I wanted to touch on was incident and call overlay. I've seen some other similar examples, but this is something that I think Explore Analytics has real power for. I mentioned at the beginning that Explore Analytics has the ability to reach into other ServiceNow sources of data. Now, if you have ServiceNow and you want to use reporting in ServiceNow, one option is to identify those sources of data, create those tables inside of ServiceNow, pipe in that data, do the mapping, and figure out which fields you want to pull, not pull, and then you wind up having to manage the movement of that data into ServiceNow. And ServiceNow winds up being bloated with a bunch of tables that are really just copies of other sources of data. The other alternative is people pull the data out of ServiceNow, and they take the ServiceNow data, they put it in a SQL database. They lose all of the context of the user. They lose all of the ServiceNow specific fields, the catalog variables, and things like that. Instead, Explore Analytics puts real-time queries to ServiceNow and the other source of data. And so what you get is something like this incident call ratio. So if I pull that up, right, so now we've got 2 trend lines. One is incidents, the other one is calls. If I look at how this is put together, it's just me combining 2 reports that I already created. One is with a call system, another is with an incident trend system. Very easy to have, I just select from the reports and add them in, and I can really easily combine multiple sets of data together. Not only can I combine, here's the number of incidents, but here's the number of calls, but I can also represent that as a ratio. Again, we saw before that ability to have this kind of Excel-like formula. Again, this is just incidents divided by calls so that we can have a ratio, and I'm formatting it as a %. And this is a real-time calculation that's pulling against data in 2 different sources of data and presenting that to the user. Right? So here I can see that in December, 57% of my calls became incidents, right? Which is significantly higher. So now we're looking, okay, why are so many of the calls that are coming in going to incidents? Do we need to improve our knowledge management? Do we need to improve training with the folks who are handling the calls, right? There's a lot that you can pull out of that. I bring this up because just to mention another case study, we had a organization that one of the things that they did was they wanted to supplement their ServiceNow approach with approaches with their call system, their chat system, their call queuing system, so that they could really understand the full scope of how are their customers, and in that case it was actually the customers in the stores, how are they getting their interactions solved, and be able to see across all of that what the time to resolve is, not just looking at it specifically from ServiceNow. They also use that capability to combine with their legacy ticketing system for some historical view. Now, putting it all together, once I have all of these different reports, we can publish them into the ServiceNow user interface. So this is my ServiceNow dashboard. This is an example of a call center analysis that's showing, abandon rate from my call management, first call resolution of my incidents, the abandon rate on the call system, the incidents opened, resolved, and backlog, and then further down some of these denser pivots, right? So that you can really, in ServiceNow, have that fully interactive, fully drillable, fully actionable world that has a lot more richness, calculations, and blurs the lines between those different systems and breaks down those silos. You can see we're also doing a lot in terms of giving the user helpful documentation directly embedded into the dashboard. If I look at this PPM dashboard that's pulling together across multiple tables within project, we also have these slicers where I could say, well, show me just for the green IT initiative and show me within that just for a particular project manager. So we've just scratched the surface. I hope that you've seen some useful reports that might get your brain moving on things that you could have an impact with yours. There will be a recording available for folks who want to review and get a little deeper. I would also say that on our YouTube channel, we have a lot of videos that go deeper into how to build step-by-step some of these reports, other great use cases. So come to the Explore Analytics YouTube channel and see all of the great content that's there. If you're not currently using Explore Analytics and you'd like to give it a shot, you can go to our website and I'll send this link out, myexploreanalytics.com/registration. You can sign up, you can connect it to your dev environment or to one of the ServiceNow sandbox instances and try out these reports. Like I said, you can do this within a few minutes. It's not going to require any coding or scripting. It's very easy to do. Now we're coming up on the hour, but if you have any questions and you'd like to put that in the chat, I'd be more than happy to answer them. You can also respond back to any of the emails if you want to set up a particular time to connect and look at your own use cases. Great. So the question is, in terms of the setup process with ServiceNow, there's a 10-minute video that walks through it step by step, but just so you're aware, I can go to the data source, add a new data source, which is ServiceNow. All I have to do is apply this update set to whichever environment I want to connect to and provide a user that will connect through, and we'll automatically discover your tables, including custom tables, custom fields, and you can report against the entire suite. It's a great question. Great. So the second question is about question is about the IT service management analytical application. So as I mentioned, with our Enterprise Plus subscription, it's a pre-built suite of reports. So if I look, for example, here, it comes with a number of dashboards around incident, problem, change, the service catalog. Again, it's a great jumpstart with some of these very common reports that we see across a lot of organizations. And there's a question, is this typically deployed across the entire enterprise or to a dedicated reporting team? So there's kind of a couple layers when we're talking about the deployment. Some of our customers, they buy a few licenses just so that they can do some, personal reporting to, be able to answer questions to management. Most typically what we see is that a lot of these dashboards are deployed across the enterprise. So I mentioned that large manufacturing company, they have a reporting dedicated team that is, developing a lot of these gold standard dashboards and deploying that out. And then there's a large amount of read-only users that are consuming that. I would say that that's the more typical approach. However, it is designed as a very quick, drag and drop kind of business analyst focused tool. So we do have other organizations that do actually empower business stakeholders to run the report. Typically, the entire enterprise doesn't need to be building reports, but for example, providing them to lots of individual support managers is something that we've seen. One of our customers is a managed service provider that provides to multiple small manufacturing companies. It's a shared service organization for kind of these independent companies. And they wind up giving to the process owners at each of those companies the ability to build their own reports. I'd be happy to discuss further since this is a quick webinar, but I hope that answered the question. Are there any other questions at this time? Great. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'd also be happy to share presentations tailored to your organization, to you and your team, or help you get set up with that evaluation. Thank you all for your time. Please stay safe and healthy. I hope you're good wherever you are, and have a great weekend.